Olá, boa noite. Sejam muito bem-vindos a mais um grande momento do Conexões 2020, a educação gerando redes de transformação. Hoje nós temos uma palestra magna especial com Renzulli. Agradecemos a presença diretamente dos Estados Unidos. Nós teremos aqui a nossa querida Noricel Villalonga Aguilera, diretora e fundadora do Instituto Alfalume, no qual eu tenho orgulho de representar. A Ângela Virgolin, que é uma grande e querida parceira que está trabalhando e exaustivamente aí no Combrás, Conselho Brasileiro para a Superdotação, e a querida Denise, que vai fazer todo o comando da moderação desta incrível palestra. Eu passo a palavra à Denise para apresentar o nosso querido Renzulli.
Obrigada, Marcos. Boa noite a todos e a todas. É com muita honra, alegria e emoção que coordenarei a primeira palestra magna do Congresso Internacional Conexões, promovido pelo Conselho Brasileiro para a Superdotação, em parceria com o Instituto Alfalume, palestra a ser proferida pelo eminente professor Joseph Renzulli. Dr. Renzulli tem o título de Distinguished Professor pela University of Connecticut, doutor honoris causa pela McGill University, no Canadá, e pela Universidade Camilo José Cela, na Espanha. Ele é um dos fundadores do NIAG Center, the Lynn and Ray NIAG Endowed Chair for Talent Development, bem como foi o primeiro diretor do National Research Center on the Gifted and Talented na University de Connecticut. Atualmente denominado Renzulli Center for Creativity, Gift Education and Talent Development. Como todos sabem, professor Renzulli é um líder mundial e pioneiro na área da educação do superdotado. A Associação Americana de Psicologia, a APA, nomeou-o como um dos 25 psicólogos mais influentes no mundo. Em 2009, ele recebeu the Harold McGraw-Jr. Award for Innovation in Education, considerado o Prêmio Nobel da Educação. Atuou também como consultor da Força Tarefa da Casa Branca para a Educação dos Superdotados. O seu modelo dos 3 anéis e o modelo triádico de enriquecimento tem fundamentado estudos, programas e serviços para os superdotados em diferentes continentes. No Brasil, em especial, seu modelo subsidiou a elaboração de políticas públicas e a criação de núcleos e centros de atendimento ao superdotado. Sem dúvida, seu trabalho tem feito a diferença na vida de milhares de estudantes superdotados brasileiros. Ele também estabeleceu na University of Connecticut, juntamente com a professora Sally Rees, o Confratute, um misto de conferência, fraternidade e instituto. Um programa de verão realizado ao longo de uma semana que acolhe professores interessados em obter formação na área de superdotação. Em julho do ano que vem, ocorrerá a 43ª edição do Confratute. Também em parceria com a professora Sally Rees, fundou Joseph Renzulli Gifted Talent Academy, em Hartford, Connecticut. Trata-se de uma escola modelo com foco no desenvolvimento de alunos superdotados provenientes de nível socioeconômico desfavorecido. Um dos seus trabalhos mais recentes é um programa online de aprendizagem personalizada, que elabora o perfil de cada estudante a partir de seus pontos fortes, talentos, habilidades, interesses, estilos de aprendizagem e de expressão. O professor Renzulli publicou mais de 500 trabalhos, entre artigos, livros, capítulos, publicados em várias línguas, inclusive na língua portuguesa. Para além da sua excelência na ciência e educação, gostaria de destacar aqui que o professor Renzulli é um ser humano admirável, inspirador, gentil, humilde, otimista, incentivador, um bom coração. Eu aproveito aqui para fazer um parênteses rapidamente. Eu gostaria apenas de lembrar quando eu cheguei à Universidade de Connecticut em 1995, numa época que não tinha WhatsApp, Skype, Zoom, nada disso, E eu fui muito bem recebida e acolhida pelo professor Renzulli e sua equipe. E ele não sabia, tinha a menor ideia de quem era a Denise, né? Então, eu agradeço, né? Thank you, Joe, for everything you did for me and for my country. You have made a difference in my life. Agora, então, eu passo a palavra ao professor Renzulli, que proferirá a palestra intitulada Modelo de Enriquecimento Escolar, desenvolvendo habilidades de funções executivas. Desde já, em nome do Conselho Brasileiro para a Superdotação e do Instituto Alfa Lumen, agradecemos ao professor Renzulli por ter aceitado gentilmente participar deste evento. Nosso muito obrigada. Esclareço também ao nosso público que os slides do professor Renzulli em português estarão disponíveis mais adiante aos participantes e também informo que a palestra do professor Renzulli terá duração de cerca de 1 hora e, em seguida, abriremos meia hora para algumas perguntas da audiência. Então, com vocês, professor Renzulli. Joe, you can start.
Thank you very much, Denise. It is a great pleasure and a great honor for me to be with you, and especially to have the opportunity to work again with Angela and Denise, who are two of our outstanding graduates that I would go so far as to say, not only have they converted gifted education in Brazil, but also internationally in the work that they do. I'm going to be going over 4 major topics that you see on the screen. I always like to point out at the very beginning that one of the topics that we'll be addressing tonight, that is executive functions, is a part of our work that deals with using the heart as well as the brain in developing the talents of young people. We want them to take on the goal of making the world a better place. And so they need to lead with their heart as well as with their brain. I begin almost every lecture with this slide. And this is something that teachers know, but sometimes haven't thought about a great deal. All learning, and when I say all learning, I mean from little children to doctoral students, exists on a continuum. And that continuum ranges from deductive and didactic and prescriptive on the left, and all the way over to investigative and inquiry-oriented and creativity-focused on the right. And I believe that our work has focused on the right-hand side of this model. And our goal, people often ask me, what's the goal? What's the purpose of gifted education? And my answer is always the same, is to produce the next generation of inventors, designers, writers, researchers, entrepreneurs, the people that improve the economy of the country, the culture, the society by the great work that they do. And so I think that it is important to understand that the purpose of our work has been to focus on what we call creative and productive giftedness. And I'm going to try to actually define that by giving you an example of what I mean. And I've got hundreds of these examples, but I'll pick one from my recent work. This is a little boy named Michael. And Michael was in a very low income school district in Massachusetts. And there they have a program that we developed, which is called enrichment clusters. And enrichment clusters are small groups of students with a common interest who come together to create or produce something. And so here is a very brief definition. Again, you're going to get this in Portuguese, but the first line says, have you ever thought about raising money so you could help people in our community who may need something they can't afford? And so Michael did some brainstorming, working with his teacher. He came up with the idea of starting a button making company. He called it the Creative Button Boutique. And he had 2 or 3 other people who were on his staff. And First thing he did was borrow some money from the principal to buy a button making machine and to start the business that he started. And here is where the role of the teacher comes in. With the help of the internet, we found him many resources on how to start a business. Here you just see some examples of the great resources that he found. And also something that is very important to me if we want, I call, this is an example of type 3 enrichment, and I call type 3 enrichment thinking, feeling, and doing like the practicing professional, even if at a more junior level than an adult scientist or writer or entrepreneur. And these how-to books are a very important way of giving young people the skills to think and feel and do like a practicing professional. So here's a picture of Michael. When I visited, he showed me some of the custom-made buttons. You could have buttons made for your child's birthday or for an anniversary or some special thing. And Michael's team would design and produce the buttons. So here you see Michael giving me one of the buttons. And I like this close-up because let's take a look at Michael's eyes. The whole idea of lighting up a child's eyes is really, to me, the thing that is what we are trying to do with the pedagogy that I just mentioned on the right-hand side of that continuum of learning theory slide. I love these two quotations. Happiness is not a goal, it is the byproduct of the things that you do. And success does not create happiness. Happiness creates success. And so we're actually working right now, in fact, on an instrument to study school happiness in children. I'll be talking about that a little later. Now, there are 4 theories underlying our work. The first one is one called the 3-ring conception of giftedness, which guides our identification procedures. You'll hear more about that. The second, the enrichment triad model, the 3 types of pedagogy that we use to develop gifts and talents. The third one is called Operation Houndstooth, and this really focuses again on helping young people develop skills like empathy and sense of contributing to other people. And the fourth one is one that we'll be focusing on today, and that is leadership for a changing world. And this is where my one section of this presentation dealing with executive function skills will come in. Now, very briefly, our model differs from a lot of other models in one main way, and that is that we try to provide general enrichment activities to all students. And type 1 and type 2 will be describing, and also in enrichment clusters, you saw the example of Michael. And this gives young people who may not have a 130 IQ or whatever many places use to determine giftedness, it gives them a chance to develop their gifts and talents. And so I think that these are really the main pedagogical focuses of our work. But again, youngsters that do well in the regular curriculum in type 1, type 2, or the enrichment clusters need special opportunities and resources and encouragement to follow up on those strengths and interests. And so again, this is a little bit of how our model differs from other models around the world. People have asked me many, many times, well, what are the goals of school-wide enrichment? And I don't go through the list of things, creative thinking, critical thinking, and all of that. Our goals are very simple. The first goal is enjoyment. Anything you enjoy learning, you work harder at, you produce better products. Enjoyment leads to engagement. Engagement's kind of difficult to define, but think about it as the first time you fell in love with something, cooking or gardening or painting, or someone, how your whole body changed. You were in love with something. And then these things also produce enthusiasm for learning. If you're really turned on about something, you're going to want to learn more about it rather than something that's always required on the left-hand side of the model, the ministry dictated curriculum. In our work, again, we talk about two types of giftedness, and high achieving giftedness, which is very important. We want these youngsters to score as high as possible on all of the tests that we seem to want to give children these days. But our work really has been more focused on creative, productive giftedness. And again, Michael is my best example there. A quotation by a famous leader in science for the gifted, Paul Brandywine, always used to say, oops, okay. I use this next slide to point out just some examples of very famous people. Thomas Edison, America's greatest inventor, invented the light bulb, the phonograph, the movies, things like that. He was considered to be not very bright by his parents or his teachers. In the upper right-hand corner, we have Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin Airlines, who had a severe learning disability. Underneath, we have Temple Grandin, who has high functioning autism, and yet she's the world's leading authority for the humane treatment of animals that are raised for food. And down on the bottom right, we see Steven Spielberg, who you all know from his many, many movies. And he was never a good student. If you read his biographical material or his TED Talk, he will tell you that he was a failure at regular school. But since he was 8 years old and got a wind-up movie camera, all he wanted to do was make movies. So the quotation by Paul Brandywine that seems to remind me of all of these things is, "By their deeds ye shall know them, by the things that they do, much more so than just some arbitrary cutoff score." Again, related to the three-ring conception of giftedness, my colleagues and I have developed many instruments over the years, not just to look at academic strengths, obviously they're important, but we also want to look at interests, at learning styles, at how young people like to express themselves. And then finally, some new instruments on leadership and executive functions that I'll be talking about later. These things, again, fall into more specific areas which you see in these categories. And that list of expression styles, there is only a very brief summary. There are many, many more different ways that people express themselves. And if I can find out that a youngster would rather dramatize it or write about it or make a movie about it or form a community action project about it, I can do more with that student than just simply teaching him more material faster. And again, here's just a few examples of the instruments that we developed. You're going to see our new executive function instrument, at least some questions from it a little later on. We're doing research on interest. We've done interest learning styles and expression styles. Now we're working on executive functions, school happiness, and engagement instruments. And so again, many of these instruments that have already been developed are at our website, and you're certainly welcome to take a look at them. We do have a book on our new teacher rating scales, parent rating scales that you see in the upper right-hand corner. This is just an example from our Interestalizer instrument, where we ask youngsters a series of questions. If they were going to make a movie, what would the movie be about? And there are several different choices there. So the instruments also are designed to find out those, what are now being called the soft skills, in order to make better programming decisions for young people. We've developed them again for primary children who use much simpler language, and they mark it by checking the right happy face. All of these instruments, by the way, have been digitized, and in our Renzulli learning system, there's a Portuguese version as well. Now, one of the instruments that's a very important one we call an action information message. And this is something that we make a note of when a child seems to get turned on to something. And here's an example that talks about a little boy who has gotten very interested in making a solar car. And it came from a classroom teacher to the teacher of the gifted, who happened to be Sally Reese. And when Sally got this, they made time for Stephen to come and work with her in the resource room. And after several months, he developed a very exciting solar car, which he entered into the Connecticut State Science Fair. So note that all the children in our work develop some kind of product, written, oral, visual, constructed. Very, very important. So I summarize this by talking about what I call assessment for learning rather than assessment of learning. Standardized achievement tests tell us what a child already knows. A test that a teacher gives at the end of a unit in reading or mathematics tells us what a child already knows. And obviously that's interesting information. But I want some information that tells me, again, the most important things. What does a child like to do? His or her interest? What style do they learn best? How do they express themselves? And again, the new instruments that I mentioned before. So we're trying to get a little more balance. So there's so much balance on the left-hand side here of the just regular standardized tests. So the two kinds of assessment, the assessment for learning and the assessment of learning at the top, and then the assessment for learning. And we've been collecting and developing instruments in all of the areas that you see down there in the left-hand corner. And again, anything that I develop, you are welcome to translate into Portuguese. Now, there's one little problem with all these things, and they can create mountains of paperwork, and teachers have to interpret them. So what we've done in our Renzulli learning system is to basically digitize all of these things. The children answer the questions at their keyboard, and that produces an individual strength-based profile for each child. So here we see the Renzulli learning system, the things that we measure, and then that profile is examined by a search engine that looks through a database of 50,000 resources, and it picks resources just for that child based on, again, his or her interests and learning and expression styles. And this program is now, again, translatable into Portuguese, and it's been developed so that you can put Portuguese language resources in the database as well as the 50,000 English language resources. So here's an example of Valerie's profile. Here we see her three major interest areas and the three ways that she would like to express herself. This system can also be used by teachers. The teacher can put a topic into the system and get resources. And here I'm going to show an example of a teacher that is studying the United States Constitution. If we don't get rid of Donald Trump, we may not have a constitution. But so the teacher, I'm going to put all of these on at once just to be able to save some time. The teacher has picked out these 4 places that she would like, resources that she would like the students to use. But based on their individual profiles, the search engine has also sent them many different resources that are based on the US Constitution. So this is a tool to try to make the job of teaching easier by easy access to resources. I'll give you one example. This is a teacher I bumped into in Georgia who was teaching a unit on ancient Egypt. And so she went into the system and she found an activity. I have to click here, excuse me. She found an activity called Fun with Mummies. And what it does is it allows students to dissect and preserve their own mummy virtually. They first get a hook that they can take the brains out through the nose. They then glue it and wrap it and eventually produce their own mummy. And so it's a very hands-on way of studying an important part of ancient Egyptian history. We now move on to part 3, developing the executive functions of young people. And I've been studying this for about the last 4 years. I've read hundreds of books and articles on the topic, and there's been so much information that my expression style is I have to see it organized. And so I developed this thing called the Taxonomy of Executive Function Skills. And what we have tried to do in this taxonomy is to just organize these things into the 5 major categories that you see on the screen, and then look for resources that enable us to develop those activities in young people. And executive functions are broadly defined as the ability to engage in novel situations that require planning, decision-making, troubleshooting, and ethical leadership. It involves organizing, integrating, and managing information, emotions, and other mental functions that lead to doing the right thing in situations that do not have a predetermined or formula-driven response. And so one of the things I'll talk about is some of the resources that we use to develop these executive functions. So here again, you see the overall categories that we've been studying. We've been using a process called confirmatory factor analysis, where we develop lots and lots of questions, create an instrument, and then we go through the results to find out what correlates with what. And if something doesn't correlate with nothing else, we usually throw it out. So we may start with 50 or 60 items, but the instrument ends up being about between 15 and 25 items. I'm not going to dwell on these for a long time, but this is just the research that we've done through the confirmatory factor analysis process. And there are the 4 categories that you see. So here right now are just some examples of our instrument on executive function skills. We haven't published it yet because we're doing one more field test of the instrument. But these are the kinds of questions that we ask children to rate themselves on a 5-point scale. Most of the instruments that we've developed for the assessment for learning are completed by the students themselves rather than the teacher. Again, going back to the area number 4, I think I've given you an example of the difference between lesson learning or high achieving giftedness on the left and our focus in the school-wide enrichment triad model of creative productive giftedness on the right. Now, here's a summary of some of the teaching strategies that the research literature tells us are ways to build executive functions. Provide opportunities for applying learning. Learning has no value. Knowledge has no value unless we use it for something. So we go back to Michael again, and he needed to learn how to start a business, and he needed to learn how to make buttons and how to do advertising and marketing and sales. And he had a nice little team together. Introduce practice activities to support developing executive functions. We do a lot of this by using simulations, and think of the games that children play, the video games that they play. Those are all simulations. And so there's a lot of simulations out to put kids in a leadership or management position, and then they have to serve as problems. Have students model higher executive function skills. In other words, when they finish a project, say, all right, what are some of the things you learned about how you did this, about yourself? What skills that you may not have had before came out. So we get that kind of feedback from children. So they're doing a self-analysis. And then number 4, I should really make this number 1 and put it in extremely large print. And that is avoid direct instruction. Direct instruction is fine for learning the regular curriculum, but in an enrichment-oriented curriculum, direct instruction is a killer. So I think that I can't emphasize that enough, and I'll talk a little later about the role of the teacher. So here again, we have triad, I mentioned before, and these are just some examples of things that we do in the 3 different types of enrichment. You see in type 1, visiting speakers, field trips, videos, things like that, interviews. Type 2, I'll be talking about in a little bit more detail. And then type 3, again, are the children becoming experts in a particular area. They produce a product and then we have them do a presentation. One of the main things in type 3 is audience. I would not be giving this lecture tonight if no one was sitting there watching their computers in Brazil. You would not be making a fancy dinner for a holiday if you didn't have your guests and your in-laws coming. You want to do your very, very best. So audience is very, very important. Now, here's just some examples of type 1. This is the president of a historical society in Connecticut, and he spoke to large groups of children. And then afterwards, we asked the children who was interested in this, who would like to do follow-up. And then they had a follow-up meeting with the president of the historical society. And look at the faces of those children. You can see that they're not the ones that said, oh, I'm not interested in this. I like this next example too. And this is someone that was talking about the history of money. And so he talked about it to a larger group in an auditorium. And then those youngsters that were interested met in a smaller group face-to-face with him to do some follow-up. I like, this is a woman demonstrating a robot that she developed. And let me emphasize here, please, when you have scientists for type 1s, make sure that you get as many women as you do men. Oftentimes our young girl students, our young women, don't see enough role models. So that's very important. We do bulletin boards. Here's one on inventions. And there were a lot of how-to books across the bottom. The day that I took this picture, most of them have been checked out by the students, but there were about 8 or 9 more books on the railing there that got children interested. One of the things that we started in Connecticut many years ago, and now it's gone nationally, is a thing called the Invention Convention, where children compete in various categories and age groups for their invention. It's like a science fair, only they have to be in original inventions. This next one is an example that Denise and Angela will appreciate because they know this person. This is Gail Herman. She teaches at our summer Confratute program that Denise mentioned, and she's doing a storytelling type 1 for many, many different children. At the end of the type 1, we have a debriefing. We ask a series of questions. What did you find interesting about the presentation? Did this presentation raise any questions in your mind? Would you like to learn more about it? So we find out who wants to follow up. So here's a group of children that were interested in doing a follow-up, and look at the looks on those children's faces. You can tell that they really got turned on by Gail's overview and general presentation. So type 1 is very important. It causes light bulbs to turn on in the heads of children. They get that aha moment. Wow, I'd like to do something about that. So I think that's very important. Again, my penchant for organizing things is showing up here. I've developed a thing which I call the taxonomy of cognitive and affective process skills. And these are the 6 areas where over the years, we have tried to collect different videos, lesson plans, teacher training materials to organize the thinking skills that are such a popular part of gifted and talented programs. And the one that I've been most interested in lately, number 6 there on the lower right, is the metacognitive skills in technology. And just to give you an example, let's take a look at creative thinking skills. There's a program called New Directions in Creativity. It has 250 activities in it. It is in the Renzulli learning system, although you'd have to translate it into Portuguese, where we ask children, what are some uses you could make of old tin cans, of paper bags, of old spoons? And here's a couple of examples of things that I picked up as examples there, that kids have made a parachute out of the paper bags, a walkie-talkie out of the tin cans, and a holder out of one of the spoons. And so I think that having access to these in our materials library at our laboratory, we have lots and lots of materials like this so that teachers can find them. And now with the internet, there's so much more available. So here again, we see type 3 enrichment, what makes a problem real, the young person thinking and feeling and doing like the practicing professional. We can do this with very small children. Now, the major characteristics of type 3 we've studied over the years. And the first one is personalization of interest. It's something that the child has selected, even if it's within a given course, within a history course, for example. You can have youngsters select something that they might like about, for example, one example, I had children studying the Civil War, and the teachers, the girls in the class were not very interested, a group of them, but then they started studying the fashions of the Civil War and what women wear and the big hoop dresses and all of that. The second is the use of authentic methodology, and that's where the how-to books come in, and something else I'll mention about research instruments in a little while. The third is that there's no existing solution or right answer or even right way of doing it. There's no right way to start a button making company. You could do it in somewhat different ways. If 5 kids went out and tried it, they all might do it in a different way. So much of school is finding the right answer. And I'm not going to argue about the value of that. What I am saying is that if we want to develop the gifts and talents of children, we must give them problems where it's not always finding the right answer. And again, the fourth one, and I mentioned this before, oops, I'm sorry, go back, is designed to have an impact on an audience other than or in addition to the teacher. It could be just the other children in the classroom. It could be for the whole school. It could be for the state history convention or the state science convention, or it could be to publish in a local newspaper if it's a child's poetry. My granddaughter just wrote a beautiful poem about the election of Biden, and I suggested to her she should send it to her local town newspaper. So audience is very important. Now, how do we do this? Well, we start at the center with the idea, an individual or a small group who has become interested in something. And then we build the curriculum around that rather than a presented curriculum. We're going to build that curriculum about it. So the first thing we do is we engage in what we call problem finding and focusing. A child comes in and says, I'm interested in whales. Well, what aspect of whales? Are their migration? Are their mating habits? The fact that there being too much fishing and killing of whales? The fact that whales are used for symbols. A big insurance company in America in San Francisco uses a whale as a symbol. So that's what's called problem finding and problem focusing. And we have to teach kids the skills on how to do that. They interview with a facilitating teacher. It also might be a community resource person, a parent, or someone with an expertise in that area that will agree to serve as the mentor of the teacher. One of the things I like to do is give all teachers an interest questionnaire, so that we can find out who's really good at cooking, at gardening, at landscaping, who's good at photography. Then we can blend them into our talent development program. The next one is, I'm having a little trouble, human and material resources, focus on methodology. And again, this is where the how-to books come in, very important. You must teach the child the investigative and creative skills that filmmakers use, that poets use, that landscape designers use. The next circle is providing feedback, encouragement, a shoulder to cry on, I sometimes say. Nothing in this world that is great has come off in its present form, first draft. And that's where people get feedback from colleagues, from experts, and this is part of the role of the teacher. And if the teacher doesn't know anything about it, I had one example, a youngster that's really involved in astronomy. Teacher didn't know a darn thing about it, but she found out that there was an astronomers club in the state of Connecticut. She contacted them and they were overjoyed to send somebody to come and help this child. So we don't have to be able to give it ourselves, but we have to know where to find the resource. And the last circle, and again, I say it unlocks the whole process, and that is finding outlets and audiences for the students' work. I wouldn't be here tonight if there wasn't an audience. And so the creative, productive person is always thinking they want to sell something, they want to convince somebody to believe in something, they want somebody to go to a certain place, use a certain product, and so audience is the key. Now, we start this process with the development of what we call a management plan that tries to force out some of these things. And I'm going to share an example with you. This is a management plan of a group of children who are doing research about their city in Victorian times. And I know you can't read the small print and it's not in Portuguese, but I want to point out that we try to force out the general area of the study, okay? The specific area, that's the problem focusing. The intended audiences, who are they going to present to? What formats will their work to take? The teacher helps them mainly with these things. And with this session, how do you get started? What do you do first? What do you do second? All executive function skills, I might mention. And then what are the resources that they might need? And if you could read this list, you would see that there are a lot of how-to books there. So some of the key questions then, when we want children to do this, and you'll have all of this again in Portuguese, what do young people with an interest in this area do? Not what do they learn, what do they do? What products do they create and/or what services do they provide? What methods do they use to carry out their work? What resources and materials are needed to produce high quality products? How and with whom do they communicate the results of their work? And what steps need to be taken to have an impact on an audience? And so as we work with young people on these kinds of type 3 products, we should always have that list of questions in the back of our mind. So a few helpful hints. Start an enrichment cluster program in your school. Again, you saw Michael's work as a result. Enrichment clusters are non-graded groups of students, usually come across 2 or 3 grades, who share a common interest and come together during specially designated time blocks to pursue these interests and produce a product, performance, publication, service, or presentation, or contest or competition entry. And that is the motivation that drives them forward. We do have a small book out on that. I'm not trying to sell books, but that will give you all you need to know on it. And I like one of the things in that book at the end, we do have a teacher interest questionnaire that we can get more teachers involved so you can use that with your teachers. So I want to give you an example of an enrichment cluster. This is a group of children who called themselves the Mighty Duck Savers. There was a visiting speaker who talked about a lot of ducks that were dying because they were being fed the wrong food. And so they developed a research project on endangered species and a community action project to save the ducks at a local pond. And so I'm hoping that we can get this to play. And
Enough in the fall of 1993. Jackie Hall, a park ranger, visited our school for a learning lunch. As part of its Scales and Tails program, we were introduced to a duck with a deformed beak. The abnormality was caused by the birds mistaking fishing line for bread. We learned that they will try to eat anything that looks like bread, even styrofoam. With curiosity and concern aroused, the Mighty Duck Savers were born, a group of 13 sixth grade students whose main goal was to educate fellow students and the public on dangers of feeding bread to the ducks. The perfect vehicle for us to advance our project was our school's Renzulli enrichment program, which we call Quest. Along with our 3 Quest teachers, we began to formulate a plan for what Renzulli called a Type 3 investigation. Our efforts were concentrated on an existing situation from our own city park, less than a mile away from our school. As one citizen put it, I have lived in Frederick all my life, and as long as I can remember, one of my favorite things to do was to feed bread to ducks at Color Lake. One of our first tasks was to contact city and state officials to inform them of our project and to gather information. We made several trips to workshops and meetings at City Hall when the duck problem was on the agenda. We made presentations, listened carefully, and answered questions. We conducted 3 separate duck counts at Baker Park. Putting our counts together, we arrived at an average of 765 ducks at the lake in an area that can safely accommodate 100 to 200 ducks. Most of the more than 700 ducks are mallards and wood ducks, but Color Lake is also a home to mandarin, geese, and on occasion, seagulls. Since we felt education of the public was the key to a solution, we suggested to the city that informational signs be placed around the park. We obtained an enlarged drawing of Color Lake from the city planning and zoning department and plotted where to put our proposed signs. Red squares show these locations. Shannon Haley, a college senior and graphic arts major, visited our group and helped us with the design for our proposed signs. We had our red sign made into a rubber stamp to be used at various events. Here we are being interviewed by Miranda Buck, a senior at Frederick High School and writer for their school newspaper. Frederick High is located adjacent to Color Lake, and we are happy to see their interests. We kept in contact with the Department of Natural Resources and used the materials they sent. We had lots of fun designing our own Mighty Duck Saver shirts. We decided to offer the Frederick community several opportunities to obtain information on our project by way of bread exchange days. Anyone bringing bread to the lake could exchange it for a baggie of cracked corn, which we had learned was more nutritious. We found out that the issue of to feed or not to feed was a hot topic with many points of view. These are some of the letters to the editor from our local newspaper. We had several front page articles and pictures. There were op-ed pieces too. The controversy over passage by the city of an ordinance prohibiting feeding the ducks prompted this editorial. We learned that passing a law isn't always the answer either, because then the police have to enforce it. We were praised here for having a common sense approach. We were asked by the city to design an informative brochure which could be handed out to the visitors at the lake during our bread exchange days. Mr. Sam Yee, News Post photographer, gathers information from us during our most recent bread exchange day. We were joined in this effort by several members of the Humane Society, by members of the Friends of Baker Park, by passers-by, and by the city officials, including the Director of Public Works and the Mayor of Frederick. During our bread exchange day, we noticed that as soon as the ducks see people approaching with a bag or bucket, they're conditioned to come quickly from all parts of the lake area. This leaves them vulnerable to being hit by cars. It also told us that they will eat whether hungry or not. In November 1995, the city gave final approval for our educational signs. We felt really proud seeing our work in print. Then, on Monday, November 27, 1995, city workers posted our 6 signs around the lake in almost the exact areas we had proposed. They are all attached to existing lampposts, which saved money and also made them more vandal-proof. Now that most of our project is complete, we can look back on our many successes as real-world problem solvers. We are most proud of the fact that we took a situation of overpopulation and feeding and came up with a win-win solution. And now, if our citizens follow the directive on our sign, "Don't feed the ducks," we will hopefully have a more beautiful, healthful area for people and ducks to enjoy. As the rest of our sign states, the ducks don't understand the problem, but now you do.
Let me tell you how I've used this. This was really one of my early entries into the enrichment clusters. I use it to train teachers. I believe that show them, don't tell them. So they need to see examples. And secondly, I use it with children. I want them to understand the kinds of things that they're capable of by seeing other young children doing it. And by the way, it's been translated in with subtitles into a number of languages. Other teachers in their other places in their teacher training or professional development have used it with their language scrolled across the bottom. And one of my favorite quotations is, "Example is the best school of mankind, and they will learn at no other." And my second is the screenwriter's dictum, and that is, "Show it, don't tell it." So if you want to get some ideas across, get some examples, and I'm sure that Denise and Angela can help you with many examples from the Brazil that they have worked with. And if they've got video, I always like video because that seems to be the day and age that we live in with young people these days. So we're getting close to the end here. Major features of enrichment clusters. All activity is directed toward the production of a product or service. Students and teachers select the clusters in which they will participate. That's why we use the teacher interest questionnaire. Students are grouped across grade levels. And here's the most important part. There are no predetermined lesson or unit plans. There are startup activities, mainly type 1s. But once you have a lesson plan and a unit plan, you're going back to the prescriptive didactic end of the learning continuum. Okay, we're going to move along rather rapidly. There are also 3 other things that the authentic methods of professionals would be the how-to books, divisions of labor. That's where many individual talents develop. Specially designated time blocks are set aside, and the rules of regular schooling are suspended. So that's elaborated more again. Here's just some examples of titles of different enrichment clusters in various subject matter areas that I've collected over the years. I've got many longer lists, but that will give you some ideas to get started. And now here's a key thing, the difference in the role of the teacher. I have to shut this phone off because it's so the typical role of the teacher is what's sometimes called the sage on the stage, the teacher lecturing to the students. But I believe that what we need to do in the kind of teaching that I'm talking about today in enrichment clusters or anything else for that matter, is that we need to be what's called the guide on the side. Get them started, walk around, see if they have any questions, make some suggestions about resources. So again, helpful hint, here are some of my very favorite how-to books that teach children, Plays for Young Puppeteers, Student's Guide to Social Action, the Kid's Business book you saw that Michael used, and we have a whole library of them in Renzulli Learning, literally dozens, maybe hundreds of how-to books. Here's one that just tells a young person the 4 major questions that real live historians raise. Here we have another thing that we've done in our lab is we've collected a number of instruments for data gathering, everything from a clipboard where children can jot down frequencies of something to things like eye charts, tape measures, dissection kits, salt analyzers, and each one is in a box, and we use that in our teacher training. And we do have a small book out on that as well, if you're interested. Another helpful hint is to monitor yourself in how often you use verbs from these 3 different lists. The first list is all questions that relate to memory. The second list is words that you use to raise thinking skills. And the last one is words that you use to develop creative and productive skills. And so I think in our teacher training, in fact, I'm designing a research study right now where teachers will record themselves, and then the computer artificial intelligence will analyze how often they used words from each of the 3 lists. And they can use that to say, okay, I'm too much in memory words. I've got to get more into thinking skills or creative and productive thinking skills. The other thing that's very important is what I call JIT, or just-in-time knowledge. There's 2 kinds of knowledge in the world, and thanks to the internet, we don't now have to depend on just textbook knowledge. There's virtually almost anything in the world that young people can find out by going on the internet, and that's why that 6th area of type 3, metacognitive skills and technology, has become so important. And so we need to actually do some type 2 training. You're trying to find out about whales. Here's the ways that you can go about it on the internet. And so again, use of the media, internet, television, radio, newspapers, magazines, is so much more available to young people around the world. How do we develop creative, productive giftedness? I call it the concept of OR: opportunities, resources, and encouragement, but always, always, always in the student's area of interest. So we end up what makes for an outstanding school-wide enrichment school. First of all, total faculty involvement. Yes, teachers should have a specialist in gifted education who works with other teachers and shares some of those skills. So it is knowledge about the model, ownership. You build it your way. It's not a rigid program. As long as you reach the 3 E's. Do I have the 3 E's there? Yeah, what I call common goals, the 3 E's, but unique means. I don't want every SEM program to be a carbon copy of the other one. Make strengths of the things that of your own staff and faculty and community. Work smarter, not harder. And again, this is where the use of the internet comes in. Teacher and administrative trust. One of the things that I've had many very, very sad examples about is that teachers have gone back from our summer constitute program ready to go and really start getting some enrichment going. And the principal said, we don't do that here. We prepare the kids to take the state standardized achievement test. So the administration must be involved from the beginning, including learning about the model. The next one is celebration of excellence. Again, that's the publication, getting stuff out to different audiences. And then finally, just creating a positive, constructive energy in the entire school. And I love this little quote, the only quote that I have on the door of my office besides the example is the best school of mankind. Teachers, teamwork makes the dream work. You can't do this even if you're 100% GT teacher all the time. You can't make this cultural change in your school without working with other teachers. There's a song that I like to end with, and I'm going to say the words because if I sing it, my wife will come in and hit me with a frying pan. It's from South Pacific, and it's called, "You got to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, how are you going to make your dream come true?" Well, I have a dream, a very simple one. Schools should be places for talent development, and never give up on your dreams. These things don't happen overnight, but when you see it happening, you're going to see a lot more smiles and bright eyes on the face of young people.
In the school environment.
The most, what, I missed a word or two there.
The most difficult. Which executive function is the most difficult to be implemented at the school context?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one because I think that they all kind of interact with one another. But I think that the one that is important for me in bright young people, if they're going to do good and change the world in a good way, is empathy. I think that we have too many children who engage in bullying, who have groups where they exclude children, hurt children's feelings. And I think that there are some good simulations on that where, you know, you play the part of the bullier and then you change roles and you become the person bullied and then you have a discussion about it. And I'm very fond of simulations because it does try to put children in a place and space where they're going to have to, in a sense, act out certain kinds of roles. I think that all of them are important. They all interact, but the one that I would like to do more work and probably even do an instrument on someday has to do with empathy, because I think that we need to live in a kinder world, a world where we care more about each other than just getting rich and being a successful whatever career you go into, but again, using our gifts and talents to make the world a better place.
Thank you, Joe. Another question is regarding how do you believe that your model can be applied for adults education, for example, at the universities? SEM can be used at university, for example?
Well, that's a good question. And the only thing I can say is that at the University of Connecticut, for example, it is the theme underlying our honors program. If you ask what their theory they're using, they'll say the enrichment triad model. But I do believe, I haven't had a lot of experience in applying it in adult situations, except again at the college and university level. And here again is something I'm very proud of. The people that did that wrote a wonderful article for there's a organization of honors programs, and they have a journal, and they wrote a wonderful article describing how they use the triad in the honors program. And they do train the professors that teach honor courses in triad. And after that, I got a number of requests from different honors programs at different universities around the country. I also think it's probably a more natural way that adults learn as well. You know, they're out in the real world and they're facing one real world problem after another. And so I think that the landscape for using this with adults is very, very good and accepting landscape. We just have to get a few ideas across to them.
Great. Another question, what's the biggest challenge in working with gifted students during the pandemics?
Well, this is a really interesting question because I've had one experience, and you mentioned in my introduction, the Renzulli Academy in Hartford. Hartford has been keeping track of the percentage of participation of children in online courses. And the daily participation, this is a very urban district with a lot of low income and minority students. The daily participation for the general population has been in the 40s, 45, 50%. In the Renzulli Academy, it's run in the high 90s, 97, 98, 99%. And I think that there's a reason for that. And that is that academy bases all of its work on the triad model. And it is children doing things. Again, show them, don't tell them. And I think that we are so proud of that fact. I think that why do children jump on their laptop or their iPad and play video games? Well, because it's something they enjoy. That's where the 3 E's come in. And so I think that if we want to make online learning more used more by children, we ought to look into every lesson we teach and say, what within this lesson can I do that is more interactive? And now with the online programs, you can subdivide children into groups. You could actually say the 5 children or that want to work on this form a subgroup right online, and then they can come back to the main group. And I think, again, whenever we're working on something that is of major interest to us, we just do more with it. But I do think that I'll tell you a little bit about the bad news on online learning in the US, and it's probably true in other countries, is that a lot of the kids have been getting one worksheet after another, and it's basically memorizing material. And so try to find something like the dissecting mummy that I mentioned. Put that in your history, world history course, and you'll have kids on there all the time. One of the things we found was really cute was when kids do that, they all want to name their mummy. At the end, they want to be able to put a name on their mummy. I don't know why that came up, but so I do think, again, that something that is a little more personalized, that draws upon the interests of kids, it's a little bit more hands-on. I know that because most of the activities in our Renzulli learning database are enrichment oriented, that during the pandemic, the use of that program has really shot through the roof. And by the way, they are offering it for a very large discount during the pandemic. I don't own it, a separate company owns it, but they just want to do their part in the pandemic. And so they're offering it for a very low price. And Denise, you could probably contact Mike Demaro there and find out more about that. Just RenzulliLearning.com.
And one more question. How do executive functions skills can be fostered in the school environment?
Well, I think that, again, I want to go back to that first slide that I showed you about the distinction between deductive, didactic, prescriptive, and inductive, innovative, investigative oriented. And I think that we can't foster a lot of executive function if we're the sage on the stage, if we're teaching information and children are putting it in their notebooks because they're going to take a test on it someday. You have to give kids some projects to work on or simulations. I think that put them in some kind of a situation. What would you do? Here's one that I ran across recently. What would you do to design a playground that is more accessible to children with physical disabilities? And the kids just went wild over that, and they drew up plans. They contacted architects. They went online and found companies that make, for example, special playscapes that have ramps so that children in a wheelchair could go up and use the monkey bars or some of the things at the top. And some really creative things came out of that. So I think that looking for those kinds of things is one of the ways.
Joe, is it possible to say that executive function skills are close to social emotional characteristics or social emotional abilities?
Absolutely. I think that, as a matter of fact, I've been working on an article on executive functions, and we'll get it out as soon as we get the final version of the instrument completed. And I will include social and emotional development in the title, because I do think that along with houndstooth, the other one that I only mentioned very briefly at the beginning, if you put those two things together, they all relate to social and emotional development. And so I do think that they go together. And when you think about good leadership, which is the first thing in my taxonomy of executive function skills, people want to follow a leader that they like. They have to respect the leader, obviously, but they also have to like. If you have a respect but no liking, it's not going to work. If you have liking and no respect, it's not going to work. You've got to have the two things together. And so I believe that, again, they've been referred to in all of the literature that I reviewed as the soft skills. But I think that in many ways, they're as important as the hard skills, which is, again, just simply cognitive achievement.
I think we can have two more questions and we can finish. Joe, let me ask you, what do you think, which will be the future of gift education?
I get asked that question a lot. And I think that especially now, as a result of what's happened with COVID, I think all of education is going to change, including colleges and universities. I think that too much of education has been sitting and listening. And I think that the future of education is going to be more like getting certified in particular skills. I have an article coming out sometime in December where I talk a little bit about that. And I think that, let me just give an example. I'm going to talk a personal example. My daughter and my daughter's fiance, they're both theater majors from college. They both moved to New York. The red carpet was not out for them to be in plays. And so Jeff, the fiance, started to take some online courses in coding. And then he went to more advanced and more advanced and more advanced courses, all online. And it's really interesting. The last one he took, which put him in a very high level job, he didn't even have to pay for. The company that hired him then had to pay the company that taught the course for teaching him those skills. Don't ask me, but it seems to be working. My daughter, again, had some decent acting skills, but she had a few small parts, but it wasn't anything major. So she went online and she started taking courses in film editing and film production. And now she's a freelancer, but she's got lots and lots of work because she picked up on those kinds of skills. And I think the future is going to be what skills are needed, because the job market is changing rapidly. We're seeing, they're saying 47% of the existing jobs are, even at the highest levels, are going to be gone or changed in the next few years. And we've already seen that happening. And so Jeff and my daughter, Liza, were able to make that adjustment without going and getting a degree or spending 3 years for an advanced degree. They went online to learn something very specific. They even have a word for it in the literature on it. Is called certificate stacking. That you get one certificate, you are certified, you can do this. You decide you want to go the next step up, you get another certificate. And so I think that that's a little bit about the future of education. And universities better get wise to this, or they're going to get, I don't think that they'll completely go out of business, but we're already seeing a lot of universities, especially the smaller ones and private ones in the US, closing.
Do you have time for one more question, Angela? Yes? Okay. Joe, there are some people asking about the results involving the Renzulli Academy in Hartford with low socioeconomic students. What are the results you have obtained?
Okay, well, first of all, before I tell you the results, let me tell you the goal of the Academy, okay?
Okay.
Nothing fancy. Our students are going to go on to a education beyond high school that will range from everything from community college all the way to the Ivy League schools. That our goal is mainly advanced college education, and therefore we plan their high school program. We work with the guidance counselors. Immediately, they're starting to look at colleges in their freshman year. What are they interested in? What's a good college? What does that college cost? What financial aid is available? We actually start that with them in their freshman year, their first year of high school, because I could give you a lot of fancy educational verbiage about what the goals are. It's 4-year college education beyond high school. And so if you go to the Renzulli Academy, up listed around the walls are all the pendants of the different University of Georgia, the University of North Carolina, University of Connecticut, Yale University, all those flags are up in the media room. Is named after Sally. It's called the Sally Resource Center. And all those flags are up there because the message is always, you're going to college. And what I tell the students, I give them their graduation speech and everything, that's the one thing, if you want to rise up in your community, economically, socially, culturally, that you must go as far as you could possibly go. And now again, with this certificate stacking, I'll even have to change that speech a little bit because I only became aware of it in recent years. Denise, when I get the article, it's in Tassir's journal. I'll send it to you and Angela. I'm just making it. And I'll also send you the 7 questions article, the most frequently raised questions. I can send that to you right now after this is over.
Okay. Joe, thank you so much for your inspiring lecture. Outstanding as always. It's a pleasure, an honor to have you with us. Thank you so much. And eu também gostaria de agradecer a nossa audiência por estar aqui, por prestigiar, né, o nosso evento e a palestra de uma pessoa renomada na área da superdotação. Passo agora, então, a palavra à professora Ângela para fazer a finalização.
Obrigada, Denise. Obrigada pela sua mediação. Foi maravilhosa. Obrigada a todos da audiência também. Joe, I want to say in behalf of Nuricel and me and Combrasde, we are very honored to have you here. Your presentation was brilliant, as always. You have a lot of fans over here. Lots of teachers love what you say, and they are expecting you write more and you come more to Brazil. I think in another time we'll have this same presentation in person to person. I hope so. No? And I want to say that we are all very pleased to have you here, and want to thank you for your kindness and to be here and all this time with us. And all my love to you.
Much love. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Nuricel is here. She wants to say something. I want to...
Angela, I talked with Nuricel. I will speak in behalf of her. Joseph, on behalf of Combrasde and Alpha Lumen, and if you permit me, Angela, on behalf of the over 400 people that are teachers, specialists, educators, students that are seeing this presentation, we would like to thank you a lot. As Angela pointed out, thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for sharing your extraordinary work that inspire us to keep doing, and thank you for sharing your time. And we are really, really grateful. And as Angela pointed out, we hope to see you in Brazil or to do person in person. So thank you a lot. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. E eu gostaria também de avisar as pessoas que nós vamos deixar os slides disponíveis, traduzidos, né? Nós tivemos pequenos problemas aqui com a tradução, e isso será resolvido em tempo para as próximas apresentações. Peço desculpas, qualquer inconveniente, e estamos aqui para receber, né, críticas e elogios também. Estamos satisfeitos com o trabalho que foi feito.
Participações.
Com as participações de todos, e deixaremos esse material, então, disponível tanto no site do Conexões 2020, né, quanto no site do Combrage.
Combrage e Alfa Lumen, né, ambos, e agradecemos a todos que estão aqui acompanhando, convidamos para continuar acompanhando todos os painéis que acontecerão ao longo desse período, até o dia 14, que acontecem graças a essa parceria, essa união entre o evento do Combrage e o evento do Instituto Alfa Lumen, que juntos construíram e costuraram essas possibilidades. Então, agradecemos a todos, a audiência, obrigada, e o Renzulli, por favor, fale que quando, se não fosse a pandemia, ele estaria pessoalmente aqui, né, porque nós o convidamos para vir pessoalmente. Infelizmente, não foi possível pela pandemia, mas nada nos impediu de trazer essa personalidade maravilhosa aqui para compartilhar com todos. Thank you very much, Renzulli. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Obrigada.
Queria agradecer a presença do seu Renzulli e falar que o Instituto Alfa Lumen tem um prazer em parceria aí com o Combrage de realizar esse evento, que dá sequência amanhã, com muitas atividades. Ok? Boa noite a todos.
Boa noite.
Boa noite. Good night,
Boa noite.
Joe.
Tchau, tchau.
Have a wonderful
Bye-bye.
night. Bye-bye.